human being lives in two worlds. One is the outer world, filled with objects, bodies, movements and events. The other is the inner world, filled with sensations, emotions, memories, hopes and thoughts. We navigate the outer world with our senses and our actions, and we navigate the inner world with our awareness. The two worlds are intertwined, yet fundamentally different. The outer world is public and observable. The inner world is private and subjective. No one else can feel your pain or see your dreams or experience the way a particular piece of music moves you. Consciousness marks a unique dimension of reality. It is the light within which the world appears. Despite its familiarity, consciousness remains one of the deepest mysteries in metaphysics. We know what it is to be conscious because we experience it. Yet we struggle to explain what consciousness is. How can a physical body made of cells and molecules give rise to the vividness of color, the warmth of emotion or the sharp edge of pain? How can electrical signals in the brain produce a sense of meaning or a feeling of unity? How can matter become mind? Philosophers have wrestled with these questions for millennia. Some ancient thinkers believed that the soul is fundamentally different from the body. Others argued that mind is simply a form of matter. Modern neuroscience has illuminated many processes in the brain, yet the gap between physical mechanisms and subjective experience remains. Many call this the hard problem of consciousness. It confronts us with the limits of our understanding and invites us to explore the metaphysical nature of mind. In this lecture, we will examine the ontology of mind and consciousness. We will explore the distinction between mental and physical states, discuss the nature of qualia, examine the major theories of mind, consider the role of intentionality and representation, and reflect on the place of consciousness in the structure of reality. We aim to understand not only how the mind fits into the world, but how the world becomes meaningful through the mind. The first step in examining the metaphysics of mind is to recognize the distinction between the inner and outer aspects of reality. The outer world consists of objects and events that can be observed by many. It is governed by physical laws and described by scientific theories. The inner world consists of experiences that only the subject can access. These experiences include sensations, emotions, perceptions and thoughts. They have a qualitative aspect. They feel like something. The distinction is not absolute. The inner world is shaped by the outer world. Sensory inputs influence experience. Memories are formed from external events. Social interaction affects emotional life, yet the qualitative nature of experience remains irreducible. Two people may see the same painting, yet their experiences differ. One may find it beautiful, another unsettling. The painting is the same, but the experience is not. This raises the question of how the inner and outer worlds are related. Are they distinct substances, as some philosophers suggest? Are they two aspects of one underlying reality? Are mental states nothing more than physical states described from a different perspective? These questions shape the metaphysical theories we will explore. One of the central features of consciousness is qualia, the subjective qualities of experience. The redness of red, the bitterness of coffee, the sharpness of pain, the feeling of warmth or heartbreak or anticipation, all these are qualia. They are not reducible to physical descriptions. A neuroscientist may describe the activation of certain brain regions during pain, but this description does not capture what pain feels like. The feeling itself is known only to the subject. Qualia present a profound metaphysical challenge. How can properties that are subjective and qualitative arise from physical processes that are objective and quantitative? This challenge is illustrated by thought experiments such as the case of Mary, the color scientist. Mary lives in a black and white room, but knows every physical fact about color vision. When she leaves the room and sees red for the first time, does she learn something new? Many argue that she gains knowledge of the qualitative aspect of red that cannot be captured by physical descriptions. This suggests that consciousness cannot be fully reduced to physical facts. Another thought experiment concerns philosophical zombies. These are hypothetical beings that behave exactly like humans and have identical brain processes, but lack conscious experience. If such beings are conceivable, the argument goes, then consciousness is something over and above physical behavior. These thought experiments challenge materialistic theories and invite deeper metaphysical inquiry. Qualia remind us that consciousness is more than information processing. It involves experience. Understanding qualia is essential for understanding the nature of mind. Another central feature of the mind is intentionality. Intentionality refers to the mind's capacity to be about something. When you think of the Eiffel Tower, your thought is about the tower. When you fear a storm, your fear is directed towards something. This aboutness distinguishes mental states from most physical states. A tree is not about anything. A rock does not represent anything, but mental states represent objects, events, possibilities, or concepts. Intentionality raises questions about how the mind connects the world. How can a physical brain represent something beyond itself? How can thoughts refer to distant objects or abstract ideas? How can emotions be directed toward imagined scenarios? These questions involve both metaphysics and philosophy of language. Some philosophers argue that intentionality arises from internal mental structures. Others argue that it depends on relations between the mind and the world. Still others believe that intentionality is a fundamental feature of consciousness. Regardless of the account, intentionality shows that the mind is not isolated. It reaches outward. It relates the subject to the world in a meaningful way. One of the oldest and most influential theories of mind is dualism. Dualism holds that the mind and the body are distinct substances. The body is physical, extended in space, and governed by physical laws. The mind is non-physical, not extended in space, and capable of thought, feeling, and intention. René Descartes famously defended dualism. He argued that because he could doubt the existence of his body, but could not doubt his own thinking, the mind must be distinct from the body. He believed that the essence of the mind is thinking, while the essence of the body is extension. He also argued that mental properties cannot be reduced to physical properties. Dualism has intuitive appeal. Our experiences seem fundamentally different from our bodily states. Pain feels different from the firing of neurons. Thought seems different from brain activity. Dualism captures this distinction. However, dualism faces significant problems. The most famous is the problem of interaction. If the mind is non-physical and the body is physical, how do they interact? How does a non-physical mind cause physical movements? Descartes suggested that the pineal gland might mediate the interaction, but this explanation is considered inadequate. Modern science complicates the picture further. Neuroscience reveals intricate correlations between mental states and brain states. Damage to specific regions of the brain affects consciousness, personality, and memory. This suggests a close relationship between mind and brain that dualism struggles to explain. Despite these challenges, dualism remains an influential view. Some philosophers argue for property dualism, which holds that mental properties are distinct from physical properties, even if the mind is not a separate substance. Others argue for non-interactionist dualism or for dual aspect theories. Dualism continues to shape debates about consciousness. Materialism or physicalism is the view that everything that exists is physical or depends on the physical. According to materialism, the mind is not a separate substance. It is either identical with or fully dependent on the brain. Mental states may correspond to physical states. Consciousness may arise from complex neural activity. Thoughts may be patterns of electrochemical signals. Materialism is supported by scientific evidence. Neuroscience shows correlations between mental states and brain states. Damage to the brain affects perception, memory, and emotion. Drugs alter consciousness by affecting neurotransmitters. These findings suggest that the mind depends on the brain. Materialists offer several theories to explain the mind-brain relationship. One influential theory is the identity theory, which holds that mental states are identical with brain states. For example, the mental state of pain may be identical with the firing of certain neurons. Identity theory provides a simple and elegant account of the mind, but it faces challenges. Different individuals may experience pain through different neural pathways. Mental states seem multiply realized. The same mental state could arise from different physical substrates. Another materialist view is functionalism, which holds that mental states are defined by their functional roles rather than by their physical structure. According to functionalism, a mental state is a state that performs a certain role in the cognitive system. For example, pain is a state that causes withdrawal, signals injury, and motivates avoidance. This view allows mental states to be realized in different physical systems, including possibly machines. Functionalism fits well with computational models of mind. However, functionalism faces the challenge of explaining qualia. A system might perform the same functions as a human mind, yet lack subjective experience. This raises questions about the adequacy of functionalism for explaining consciousness. Materialism remains the dominant view in contemporary philosophy and science, but it faces persistent questions about the qualitative and subjective nature of consciousness. The identity theory proposes that mental states are identical with physical states of the brain. This theory is attractive because it offers a straightforward explanation of the correlation between mental and neural events. If mental states are brain states, the correlation is no mystery. Identity theorists emphasize that identity is not a matter of similarity, but of strict sameness. Just as water is H2O, mental states may be neural states. Yet this view requires a careful account of what it means for two things to be identical. It must explain how subjective experience can be identical with objective neural activity. It must also address the problem of multiple realizability. Mental states may be realized in different ways across individuals or species, making strict identity difficult to defend. Despite these challenges, identity theory captures an important insight. Mental life is deeply rooted in the brain. Understanding the brain helps us understand the mind. Functionalism shifts the focus from the physical substrate of mind to the organization and roles of mental states. According to functionalism, what makes a state mental is not its physical nature, but its causal role. A mental state is defined by what it does. Pain is a state that causes withdrawal, signals damage, and motivates avoidance. Belief is a state that interacts with desires to produce action. Functionalism treats the mind as a functional system. This view has several advantages. It accommodates multiple realizability. A mental state can be realized in a biological brain, a computer, or perhaps another kind of system. It aligns with cognitive science, which often models mental processes computationally. It emphasizes the relational and dynamic nature of mental states. However, functionalism faces the problem of qualia. A system might perform the same functions as a human mind, yet lack subjective experience. This suggests that consciousness is more than functional structure. Functionalism also struggles with intentionality. How does a functional state acquire meaning or referential content? These questions push functionalism to its limits. Despite these challenges, functionalism remains an influential framework. It captures important aspects of cognition and supports the possibility of artificial intelligence. Yet consciousness continues to raise difficulties. In recent years, Panpsychism has gained renewed attention. According to Panpsychism, consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe. All matter has some form of consciousness, however primitive. Consciousness is not an emergent property of complex systems, but an intrinsic aspect of all reality. Panpsychism aims to solve the hard problem of consciousness by avoiding the emergence of subjectivity from non-subjective matter. If consciousness is fundamental, then the question of how consciousness arises disappears. Instead, the challenge becomes explaining how simple forms of consciousness combine to form complex ones. Critics argue that panpsychism is speculative and counterintuitive. It seems strange to attribute consciousness to electrons or stones. There is also the combination problem. How do many small conscious entities combine to form a unified conscious mind? Panpsychism does not provide a clear answer. Nonetheless, panpsychism offers a provocative alternative to materialism and dualism. It suggests a different metaphysical structure in which consciousness permeates the world. It invites us to think about consciousness not as a latecomer in evolutionary history, but as a basic feature of being. Another approach to consciousness emphasizes emergence. According to emergentism, consciousness is a higher-level property that arises from the organization of lower-level physical processes. It is not reducible to these processes but depends on them. This view resembles how biological properties arise from chemical interactions. Life is not reducible to chemistry, yet it emerges from it. Emergentism offers a middle ground between reductionism and dualism. It acknowledges that the brain underlies consciousness but insists that consciousness is more than the sum of its parts. It also aligns with some scientific perspectives. Complex systems often exhibit emergence behaviors that cannot be predicted from their components. However, emergentism faces questions about metaphysical coherence. How can new properties arise from physical processes without violating the causal closure of the physical world? How do emergent properties exert causal influence? These questions remain open. The distinction between physical processes and subjective experience gives rise to what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problems involve explaining functions such as perception, memory, attention, and behavior. These problems are difficult but seem solvable through neuroscience and psychology. The hard problem asks why these functions are accompanied by experience. Why should brain processes produce the feeling of color, the taste of wine, or the sense of self? The hard problem exposes the limits of physical explanations. It suggests that subjective experience cannot be captured fully by studying the brain. This does not mean that neuroscience is unimportant. It reveals the correlations between brain activity and consciousness, but it does not explain the existence of experience itself. Some philosophers propose that the hard problem reflects a limitation of human cognition rather than a metaphysical gap. Others propose that consciousness may be fundamental. Still others argue that the problem may be resolved through a deeper understanding of the mind. The debate continues. Neuroscience reveals a close relationship between mental states and brain states. Brain injuries alter consciousness. Drugs change perception. Electrical stimulation can produce experiences. These facts suggest that the mind depends on the brain. However, dependence does not automatically imply reduction. A photograph depends on the chemical structure of the film or the digital encoding of pixels, yet the photograph is not reducible to these. Its content involves representational and intentional aspects. Similarly, mental states may depend on the brain without being reducible to it. This view allows for a layered ontology. Some philosophers propose that the mind supervenes on the brain. According to supervenience, any change in mental states requires a change in brain states. The mental depends on the physical, but is not identical with it. This view allows for compatibility with both materialism and non-reductive theories. The mind-brain relationship remains a central issue. It raises questions about causation, explanation, and the nature of reality. Consciousness has a first-person perspective. It is experienced from within. This perspective is not accessible to others. Even if a neuroscientist could map every neural firing pattern, she could not know what it feels like to be you unless she were you. This first-person perspective is central to the nature of mind. The philosopher Thomas Nagel famously asked, "What is it like to be a bat?" Even if we know all the biological details about bats, we cannot know what it feels like to navigate through echolocation. This thought experiment illustrates that subjective experience has a perspective that cannot be reduced to objective descriptions. The first-person point of view raises questions about objectivity. Science strives for objective truth, yet consciousness is inherently subjective. Metaphysics must reconcile these perspectives. Consciousness also involves a sense of self. We experience thoughts and sensations as belonging to us. This sense of ownership is not a simple feature. It involves continuity, memory, and perspective. The self is a complex construct. It anchors consciousness. The self is not necessarily a simple entity. It may be a pattern, a process, or a narrative. It may be constructed through social and cultural practices. Yet it remains central to conscious life. Understanding the metaphysics of consciousness requires understanding the self. In another lecture, we will examine personal identity more directly. For now, it is enough to recognize that consciousness involves subjectivity and self-awareness. Consciousness also relates to free will. When we deliberate, choose, and act, we experience agency. We feel that our actions arise from our decisions. This sense of agency shapes our moral and personal lives. Yet the nature of free will raises metaphysical questions about causation, determinism, and responsibility. These questions will be addressed in detail in the next lecture. For now, it is important to see that consciousness provides the subjective dimension of agency. Without consciousness, actions may occur through reflex or automatic processes, but conscious deliberation involves intention and awareness. Understanding consciousness prepares us for understanding free will. Consciousness challenges our metaphysical models. It is neither purely physical nor easily explained. It resists reduction and defies simple categorization. It reminds us that reality has an inner dimension. The metaphysics of consciousness invites us to reconsider the structure of the world. Does consciousness emerge from physical processes? Is it fundamental? Does it permeate reality? These questions have no settled answers, yet they shape our understanding of ourselves and the world. Consciousness reveals that reality is not only a collection of objects in space and time. It is also a field of experience. The world appears through consciousness. This appearance is not a distortion, but a dimension of reality. Understanding consciousness enriches metaphysics by showing that being has both outer and inner aspects. Having explored the metaphysics of consciousness, we are ready to address the metaphysics of free will and human agency. Consciousness raises the question of how our subjective experiences relate to our actions. Free will raises the question of whether our actions are genuinely ours. Are we free to choose? Are we responsible for what we do? How do causation and determinism affect human agency? In the next lecture, we will explore these topics. We will examine the arguments for and against determinism, consider compatibilist and incompatibilist theories, reflect on moral responsibility, and explore what it means to be an agent in a causally structural world. Consciousness sets the stage. Free will takes us deeper into the heart of metaphysics and human life.